Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood. You are watching The Political Vigilante. Contributor to Consortium News and live, Elizabeth Lee Vos. Elizabeth, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me here.
So you actually, either you reached out to me on Twitter because I've obviously been covering the Epstein case. I covered it a lot over the summer. I interviewed Whitney Webb, and she did a very extensive series, and then talked to Tiffany Fitzhenry about sort of the overlap. We saw CIA and Mossad definitely involved in the Epstein case, and we've seen CIA involved in Hollywood. And you have been covering this Finders case, which is new to me. And you reached out and sent me these newly declassified, the FBI did a huge dump of a 334-page document about this initial Finders investigation from 1987. But then you also said you got to focus on this customs agent, Ramon J. Martinez, and his report and everything like that. So first of all, as you and I have discussed on the phone, there is no real connection to Epstein and the Finders that you can find. But what it does show, and we're going to go into it, and for the viewers, we're going to reveal that that's what this episode is going to be, is that the CIA was basically running this sex cult, which is pretty horrifying. And then they basically tried to cover it up. So the Finders, why don't you just walk us through how you came across this and what you found thus far?
Sure. So the Finders case I was previously aware of before this FBI document release took place this fall. In the summer, thanks in part to the work that Whitney Webb did, which was amazing in talking about Epstein, it inspired me to take a look at the link between intelligence agencies and the alleged link between intelligence agencies and a number of different sex trafficking cases. And one of those was the Finders. The Finders was unique in the degree to which, according to this document, this customs service memo penned by Special Agent Martinez, there was a very direct link between this group and what seemed like the protection of this group and the CIA, because at the end of Martinez's memorandum, his investigation was basically ended when, according to him, the CIA made the investigation an internal matter, which cannot happen unless it's somehow related to the CIA, self-evidently. And all of the records pertaining to the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington's investigation of it were going to be classified secret, according to Martinez, and there would be no further information provided and no investigation would move forward. And it's a complicated case because the children involved there were children that were involved that were picked up in Tallahassee in Florida because they looked neglected. They're with two men who didn't answer police questions in any sort of coherent way.
Let me just give our audience just a quick backstory.
Yeah, please do. I think it's important to do that. Yeah.
Just for those of you who are like, what are the Finders? So there was, I believe, 6 children playing in a park. They looked dirty and unkempt, and somebody called the police and said, what's going on? They found these 2 men. These children had been living in a van. These guys' stories didn't match up. They had a Virginia license plate.
Right.
And I think one of them even had a Virginia or Washington, D.C. like driver's license.
Right.
And so then Tallahassee Police Department then contacted the D.C. Metro, the MPD, basically. And then from there is when it started to open up and like, oh, there was an officer with the DC PD that had already done some investigation with the Finders and said we might find a link here. Right. And that's then when the U.S. Customs got brought in, because transferring children and child pornography across state lines becomes a customs issue, and that's when this customs officer, Ramon J. Martinez, started to get involved. And then
that's where his document comes from. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what happens, and if you for those watching, I'll put in the show notes the link so you can download the FBI but the key one to read first is the 11-page customs police report, basically, is what that is. And what it does is it overviews the search warrant that they went to the property in Virginia, which is in the DC area, and uncovered the finders. They uncovered all of this stuff, and I'll show you some of it in the report here for the viewers that says they were, I mean, they were selling, they were impregnating girls and then selling their children.
Right.
Which is pretty horrific.
Yeah, and there's so many other activities that, and surprisingly, you know, they don't just relate to child abuse. They also had basically what looked like acts of terrorism that they documented. There was a file called Pentagon Break-In that they found, and this was all. There were two different locations. There was a warehouse and a residential house in D.C. There was also a third location. There was a farm in Virginia, I believe. And so the Virginia State Police were involved in that investigation. But that aspect of it, the farm aspect of it, while that's documented in the FBI release, is not delved into in Martinez's memo, because I believe that he only went to the warehouse.
Yes, that's right.
In D.C. So he's just describing, just in the D.C. warehouse, one of three locations, all of this material.
All of this material.
Extensive material.
The first document I want to excerpt I want to show is from then. So then this FBI document got released in it was mainly about 1993. This is the one that was just released, like a week ago. But it's mainly all these documents from 1993 where you can kind of start to see how they covered it up. And
essentially.
Excuse me. And said no. And said Martinez is a kind of a lone wolf or whatever in here. So let's first just go, let's just go to that real quick. So this is the Department of Justice, and I know you're looking at home, and this is like, if you're on a small screen, it's going to be hard to see, but I just want to read this out for you. So it says DOJ review of UCS, so that's the United States Customs Service documents, indicates that during the execution of the search warrants by MPD, that's the DC, that's Metropolitan Police, that's the DC Police, and the two finders' properties, and it's all redacted, Customs Agent blank claims to have observed, and now this we know is Ramon J. Martinez.
We can definitely tell that's what they're referring to, yes.
Because the FBI document, for the viewers, has all these redactions in it. I mean, it's just littered with them.
Yeah, they actually never refer to Martinez by name. We can tell because it says Special Agent of the Customs Service, but they never. So that way, you can't go and look up his memo. If you don't know what you're looking at, you're going to be very lost very quickly. But
that's the intention. It's so clear that they just did, Freedom of Information Act. This is how they apply to the Freedom of Information Act, because 25 years just expired, and then they dump all this stuff, and you got to know where to look. Claims to have observed a substantial amount of computer equipment and documents purportedly containing instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. This is already them whitewashing it.
Absolutely.
Because
there was so much more than that to start with.
If you go to, and let me find his actual, let me go to this. Okay, so this is now, let's go to, this is Ramon J. Martinez's document. And I know this is really dense and you probably can't read it, but I'm going to read it for you. So this is Department of the Treasury. I'm just showing this is the part of the 11-page document. They initiated an investigation of the two averages provided by the Tallahassee Police Department. So as we said, they arrested these two men in the van with the kids in Tallahassee, and that's where they started to get these addresses up in Virginia. December 86, an informant had given him information regarding a cult known as the Finders, operating various businesses out of a warehouse located at 1307 4th Street, and were supposed to be housing the children at 319, 320 West Street Northwest. So this warehouse is the one that they get the search warrant was. The information was specific in describing blood rituals and sexual orgies involving children and a yet unresolved murder in which the finders may be involved. With the information provided by the informant, Detective Bradley was able to match some of the children in Tallahassee with names of children known alleged to be in custody of the finders. So this investigation was already in place when they uncovered or found these people in Tallahassee, right? So, again, this then is still this is still the customs form. Computers, printers, numerous documents, cursory examination of documents revealed detailed instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. The instructions included impregnation of female members of the community, known as finders, purchasing children, trading, and kidnapping. So when we go back to this document, that's
well, and let me break in one moment
Sure.
and add also that the as well, and it's hard to kind of get all of the relevant and the really important information from that memo because there's so much of it. But they also discuss in the Martinez memo, or Martinez writes about documentation of two children being purchased in Hong Kong via a contact at the Chinese embassy. There's international trade of currency. There's all sorts of stuff going on that is not even bothered to be, it's not mentioned in the FBI documents, which is another reason you have to read the Martinez memo to understand the level to which they're not even discussing so much of this.
Well, yeah, that's such a great point. So then to go back to, this is the DOJ document that just says computer equipment and documents construction for children for unspecified purposes. They just leave that there. Now, while the original document says unspecified purposes, the original document, as you say, goes back to show wire transfers, telex between Hong Kong, the UK. I mean, like, and again, this Chinese embassy in the Martinez report, he gets a 1-year visa to be in the United States, where he's from January 87 to December of 87, where he's just a student.
At Georgetown, I believe.
Yes. Georgetown.
Yes.
In Virginia. So right in the DC area.
Nothing to see here. Yeah, absolutely.
No. So it's really, again, to the viewers, please go through the 11-page, but I want to show you some more stuff.
While you pull it up, can I just tell people as well that in the Martinez memo, in addition to that Chinese national that was given the visa, that also brings up I believe it was passports that were given to members of the finders that Martinez talks about that were shown to be to North Korea, North Vietnam, Moscow, and I think there's one other that I'm missing, but essentially during the height of the Cold War, when those types of passports could only be given through intelligence agencies, through the State Department, this could only have happened and been approved by the US government. So that's another important point to add.
Yeah, and I'll show you that. I'll show everybody that in a second. First, I want to show, this was sort of the summation of this is again by the Ramon J. Martinez, the customs agent's report, where he says Thursday, February 5th. This is after they went to the warehouse. This is the date they went to the warehouse to serve the warrant. Senior Special Agent Harold and I being Ramon Martinez, assisted the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan PD. So anytime you see MPD in this report, that's what they're talking about, MPD, with 2 search warrants involving the possible sexual exploitation of children. During the course of the search warrants, numerous documents were discovered which appeared to be concerned with international trafficking in children, high-tech transfer to the United Kingdom, and international transfer of currency. So this was his, after he served the warrant. This is like the summation, what he's getting, right? And he just spells it out right there. Okay, and then the next one, I was advised that all the passport data had been turned over to the State Department for their investigation. This is where the burying and the covering up starts. The State Department in turn advised MPD that all travel and use of the passports by the holders of the passports was within the law and no action would be taken. This included, as Elizabeth just said, travel to Moscow, North Korea, and North Vietnam from the 50s to the mid-70s. So this is the height of the Cold War. This is not current Moscow. This is the Soviet Union. This is North Korea, which is still communist. This is North Vietnam. We were in war.
Yes, exactly.
So you read that stuff. That's why I say you got to read that first. So when you read that first, and then you go through the FBI and you start to see the DOJ saying stuff like this, like on page 9. This is from the DOJ. This is 91, right? Dated 93, acting assistant. I guess that's revised, but this came out in 93. General John C. Keeney, Criminal Division, Department of Justice, to Assistant Director Larry Potts, Department of Justice, FBI conducted preliminary inquiry into the allegations made by blank. So that's probably Ramon J. Martinez.
Right.
That's my guess. Concerning child sexual abuse by a group known as the Finders, and what role, if any, so they're planting doubt, was played by the United States intelligence community. This communication designates the Washington field office, this is the FBI field office, as
Right.
office of origin, and set specific leads concerning the investigation, this preliminary inquiry. What do you make of that when you read that? Is that...
So I find that really interesting because one of the things that it's may not, like the redacted name there, I don't know that was Martinez. The reason I say that is because once Martinez's memo, was seen by some politicians, there were a number of different congressmen, I believe, who basically said, we want an investigation into this. It escapes me right this second whether they were local, like Florida state house officials, or whether they were like national congressmen. But the point being that they were raising a stink about this. It was in the paper. It was a major national story. It was on top of the headlines in 1987. So it was embarrassing for the government to be linked to this. And so that's why whoever's name is redacted in that document, it's responding to that embarrassment and that criticism. And I think it is very interesting that they start to backpedal almost immediately in their initial announcement of this preliminary inquiry, if any involvement, et cetera, et cetera.
So it might not be Martinez, but the key point though that you're making is that if any is the that's where they start planting the seed of CIA, and they just kind of that's how the CIA operates when they're busted, is they just make it seem like it's this kind of crazy witch hunt. Oh, the CIA, everybody, anytime there's something wrong, they say the CIA was involved, and it's like that's how they just kind of, blow it out.
Well, and that's what's so different about this case, is that it's such a black and white, very methodical and even-handed. This is not hysterical language from Martinez. I mean, he's a special agent. This isn't some random wacko with tinfoil on their head that's accusing the CIA of this. So I think it is extremely, I think this case is one of the most important when it comes to intelligence agency links with, a sex trafficking ring or any other illegal activity in reference to children. I think it's one of the most important cases out there for that reason. Because
it shows the kind of typical, an agent who seems like a pretty decent field agent. If he made it up to that level, you don't get to be that level of a field agent. If you're not a good investigator, you don't make it up to that level. Uncovers this thing, says we need to dig deeper, and then he's told quiet, shut up, and then it's like, no, nothing happened. I mean, that's just...
And he doesn't even he can't do anything. So he just says, well, this is ended. It's been classified and nothing else is going to happen. That's his statement. At the very end of his document is there will be no more investigation. No action will be taken. And so he's not, hysterically screaming, we need to, witch hunt for the CIA or anything like that. He's just stating the way that it ended. But the level to which he keeps his head level through that document is actually one of the most shocking things about it, in my opinion.
Say that again. The
way that he remains very level-headed, very methodical, clinical throughout the entire thing when he's talking about these incredible, pieces of evidence that he's witnessing. I think that's one of the most shocking things about it. The contrast between his very level-headed recalling and recounting of this investigation and the content of it being so mind-blowing.
Well, yeah, and here's one of the things that's in the DOJ report, the FBI report that they released. They put this in there, but again, it's just sort of buried in there. So there's this. As a result of the information developed by Tallahassee Police Department during the traffic stop, they contacted Washington, developed information that utilized to obtain a search warrant for a warehouse and residence located in D.C. owned by the Finders. U.S. Customs participated in this search and blank, blank, blank noted that approximately 7 computers and numerous floppy disks were seized during the search.
So there we have documentation that seems to corroborate the fact that Martinez was there, the fact that he had a legitimate role in this investigation.
Yeah, and if you seize 7 computers and floppy disks, there's going to be some information on it. But here's the most important. This is the key here. Also advised that he had been told that the documentation had been located in the D.C. files to indicate that Senator John Steiker, deceased, had been his sergeant during the Finder search, had been contacted by a blank who had told him to step away from the Finders case.
Allegedly, they say, and the blank alleged or
allegedly
space allegedly
yeah
blank.
And then there's more allegedliness, but they just sprinkle that in there just to say their due diligence, but that this guy's dead allegedly, if any. They just use that language that gives them this out from being that. And then the other I've talked about the telex messages. So then this is now let's go back. So we've shown through the Martinez report that he found information. This, like you say, corroborates that he found files. Martinez lays out what it was. It was impregnating, it was selling children, there was telex, there was money exchanged. He lays that out very clearly. So then this, going back to the 93 FBI document, search warrants on the property. Search warrants did not produce evidence of federal or state violations of law concerning sexual exploitation of children. However, it appears that the children found in Florida had lived at this location. That's a lie.
It is. It is. And yeah, and I don't even know where to start with that, but I would like to add as well, one of the ways that the documents published by the FBI in their internal kind of review process attempt to discredit Martinez is by saying, well, we didn't find the evidence that he talks about. But they also say the way that they get away with that is to say and throughout, and it's dispersed, it's disorganized. But if you read the entire FBI release, you see that multiple different officers had tried to get evidence lists and descriptions of evidence found by the Washington Metro Police Department. And they find that the Metro Police Department responds by saying, we don't have lists of the evidence that we found in these DC finders locations. We do not have descriptions of the evidence that was found in this DC finders location. And we don't have the names of the personnel that were present when during the investigation of the property. So in that way, they clear themselves of being, being able to confirm or deny Martinez. So they try to say that other agents didn't see the same thing, but then they can't prove it with their own evidence list. They just get rid of it.
And why that is complete bullshit is if in the Martinez, he says, I had to wait until DCPD, they took over searching everything. They assigned officers to go through all of the evidence and log it and everything. And police departments they're all about the paperwork and logging of evidence. That's how you have chain of custody. Chain of custody to prove your case. So he says it, and again, the key is reading the Martinez report first, because it'll show. He says it, and it's very just straightforward police work. I showed up at this time. I talked to this officer.
Exactly.
He even says, I deferred to Metro PD. Once they go through their investigation, then Customs will get. He even says they had, because that was the protocol.
Right.
And then there's this, though, I want to put in that even shows more lies. So we read this one. Airtel from the field office, FBI field office, stated 418, advising that AUSA blank decline prosecution in this matter, stating that there is no evidence of a federal violation, no additional investigation in this case. So this is assistant, like the Attorney General, or
I will have. This is one of the things I haven't been able to confirm. I've heard. Some people have speculated that may have been Eric Holder, that it was the local DC U.S. attorney who declined to prosecute. And I can't confirm that. That's just something that is a possibility, but it is a possibility. It's one of those things where I'm trying to chase down people that can confirm to me, because I'm not a law enforcement officer, and I can't say for sure the protocol and where this protocol was not followed correctly. But I can say that's a possibility because he was in that position in DC at that time. In 1993 when they refused to prosecute. So it is a possibility, but I also think what's really important to recognize is even if you don't read the Martinez memo and you the first thing you hear is all of this hype from YouTube and across the social media sphere, where they're going, oh my God, this finder's released by the FBI, and you don't know anything going into it. A few things do stick out that either corroborate Martinez, but also are concerning in and of their own right. So, for example, there's one page, and I forget the page number, but the Virginia State Police, when they investigated the finder's farm, which is a rural location, they state that they found cages that children were kept in. They state that there's all sorts of different stuff like that littered through this FBI documentation that Martinez doesn't provide. So I think it's real that it does still help add to the picture that Martinez gives us. We also find out that they name, I believe it's Isabel Petty, who they say is the CIA agent and who they say is the person that had these passports going. But it's actually the way that they word it is almost to say, well, yes, she was a CIA. We admit she's a CIA employee, but it's no big deal. She was the one given the passports. It's fine. No worries about the fact that she's the wife of the founder's leader. So,
the wife of the founder's leader was a CIA agent.
Yes, that is in the FBI documents, not in the Martinez memo. So like I said, there are some additional information that either corroborates or adds to the memo, as well as this confusing and repetitive material that tries to almost debunk Martinez. So it's a very mixed bag in this FBI file.
Well, this is again from the document, and this is what you're talking about. This sort of, it almost seems deliberate, like confusing. Was this document? Right. Was this excerpt here? SA Special Agent Blank said that he was providing this information from memory. Now this is in '93. But advised that the media blew the case out of proportion. He advised that many allegations were made regarding sexual abuse in the case, but none were proven.
Yes, I'd like to address that immediately. And that is that in other documents in the FBI file, they actually do talk about 2 of the 6 children showing signs of being sexually abused. They actually do confirm that. So that's, as you said, that's an example of this review either outright lying or misinterpreting or misrepresenting the evidence as it was found. And nonetheless, the children were given back to their parents, or what were supposedly, allegedly their parents. Well, it's mind-blowing.
The other thing, too, to back up what you just said, is in the Martinez report, he talks about finding photos of naked children where they were like provocative naked photos of children. And I mean, what was on these computers and floppy disks? There's no way. And he said there was a video room. In the Martinez report, he said there was a video room.
And that's a whole can of worms as well. He called it an indoctrination room as well.
Yes.
And one of the things that the FBI files talk about, actually, in one of the summaries from I believe it's the Washington Metro Police Department, one of the documents labeled secret, in their summary, they actually say, or the person writing the summary says, and it's very badly spelled, there are typos all through it, but it basically says, I don't think that they intended to abuse children, but I do think that one of their goals as a group was mind shaping, is what it writes. Like word for word, that's what it says. They weren't abusing them, but they were mind shaping them.
Yeah, isn't it also in the Martinez thing, did he say there was a video or photos or something of the kids being involved in mutilating goats or killing goats, the sacrifice?
Yes. He describes that, yes, literally. But the FBI documents then say, that's not a ritual, that's hands-on instruction on the slaughter of animals. Because that's how we treat. We just dress up in white sheets to stay clean. That's what they actually say.
Yeah. Tell me one kid who grew up on a farm and who's taught that.
Yeah.
That's and going back to this last part we were just reading, he advised that allegations were made regarding sexual use, but none were proven. It appears that there was parental consent for the children to travel with the individuals. So that language right there is saying there's no more customs violations here. Hey,
no trafficking.
No trafficking. So you violated no customs laws, and therefore it's like, that's where Martinez is like, well, I did my job and they told me it's over, so it's done. And it even goes into that document, which I don't even, I was just reading the Congressperson, the person in Congress who the co-sponsor, the Lewis bill to reestablish child pornography unit because the number of investigation hours went down because they merged units. Child Pornography and Protection Unit into smuggling investigations and Division Office of Investigative Programs. So there was not, so it almost seems like they said, ooh, we got to stop having a unit just dedicated to getting child pornography and sex trafficking. Let's merge it into this other unit so then we're not going to have agents dedicated just to that.
Exactly.
Which is just like, that shit drives me. I just want to put this up on the screen. I'm sorry to block your face right there, but
It's fine.
this is this is in the 300-page FBI document. So this is Congress of the United States. This was written in January '93. Help end child pornography and exploitation. Dear colleague, and he talks about this, what I just said, in '91, U.S. Customs integrated their Child Pornography and Protection Unit into the Smuggling Investigations Division, right? At the time, Customs stated that these changes have in no way affected the manner in which child pornography investigations are being conducted. And they're like, it's absolutely incorrect. Because look at, they did it in '91. So in '90, they had 100,000 hours, they had 103 convictions, right? In '92, a year after it had been killed, 57 arrests down from 82, 69 convictions down from 116, 27,000 employee hours down from 61,000. So this is again, more evidence of like, well, if the CIA basically running or funding or in the very least aware of and utilizing a sex trafficking child pornography ring, then we can't have it investigated because we're going to uncover more of them.
Exactly.
I was just yesterday, we were doing the Jimmy Dore Show live, and we were, I was somewhere, and then I was in the green room or something like that when the news was on, and the local Fox News said we found a sex trafficking case, and it was like a young woman and a young man, and you know, I'm glad that's on the news, and I'm glad they rescued her. She was in like some horrific situation and she was being trafficked. But I was like, how come these, like, you know, it's like, looks like a gang dude or whatever. Like, I'm glad they're catching him. But again, they're trying to make it seem like it's just random street crime. How come we're not talking about the finders and the CIA on the local news? Or where the fuck is Ghislaine Maxwell? How come that's not on the news? And this, to me, going to this this congressional letter saying that's when they merged that into child pornography and trafficking into smuggling. It's sort of just to keep sort of downplay this and stop uncovering the fact that the CIA, I mean, and we know Epstein had ties to the CIA. Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was in Mossad, and she is yet to be charged. She's just walking around free as a bird. And so, I mean, what do you, all the work you've done on this case, and then anything knowing about Epstein, what do you make of what, like, I don't even know what I'm saying, but it's just so like...
that's the thing about this case. It's so beyond your ability to kind of comprehend, because what aspect of it do you focus on? Do you focus on the child trafficking? Do you focus on the mention of a Pentagon break-in and terrorism and explosives? Do you talk about the passports to North Korea? Do you talk, you know, there's so much. And then the FBI documents add 300 plus pages of confusion, as well as new evidence. It is really difficult to even boil down into a summary. And I share your kind of like speechlessness when it comes to even trying to relate what are the most important points of this. There are too many of them to summarize. I think, like as we've been saying throughout this discussion, I think the most important thing people can do is to read that Martinez memo, but also to look around outside of both of those sets of documents. Because, for example, from reporting that was done after the Finders investigation blew over, and after basically everyone kind of packed up their things and went home, essentially, there were reports that were covered, that were published in local newspapers, especially in Virginia, about the Finders, kind of poking fun at the whole scandal and saying, oh, well, you know, they're just a weirdo cult. People were susceptible to satanic panic and no big deal. But they do mention, this is what's funny about those articles, is they do talk about the cult leader, who is Marion Petty, him being called the game caller, for example. And in the documents, the children in the FBI documents, they talk about, well, we're told what the people that are traveling with us tell us what to do because they're given instructions from redacted, the game caller. So we know that, for example, we can put it from those other news reports, we can put in that that was Marion Petty. And we also know that in addition to the FBI documents talking about his wife being a CIA employee, we also know from those additional news reports that were poking fun at the finders that his son, I believe, was employed by Air America. Air America was deeply involved with the CIA, deeply involved with Iran-Contra, tied to MENA and all sorts of other things that were happening in the late 80s in this, larger picture of CIA illegal activities around the world. So I think the best way to summarize this and tie it also to what the brilliant work Whitney Webb did in documenting Epstein, his ties to Iran-Contra and the CIA, and figures that were involved with Iran-Contra as well as the CIA itself, is to say that we've talked about the gun running and the drug running and the illegal arms deals and the coups and the election meddling that the CIA has been involved in for decades. But this particular aspect of CIA illegal activity is A, real, and B, has not been talked about. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
Yeah, you're right, and I think that's part of it too. And in talking to Whitney on this show and doing my own research into the Epstein case, is you get into, when you uncover, like I came at it from the sex trafficking angle, you realize, oh, they're in arms sales, they're in drug dealing and all of this stuff, and they operate without borders, and the CIA can do that, and billionaires can do that, and spy organizations with other countries, that's how they can do that, and they can have these airports like Neenah, Arkansas, and just fly anywhere on planes that aren't marked, to airports that don't exist on a map. And you're right, that is the takeaway, is the overall intelligence community is operating on all of these awful things, and trafficking children for pedophiles is a part of it.
Right. And all of those other things, whether it's drugs, guns, or other illegal activities, we really do have a substantial amount of journalism that has exposed those things, but we don't have that type of journalism on child trafficking. And what the Finder shows us, like we just said, is it shows us the drug running, not drug running, excuse me. It shows us the gun running and the other, or the other type of activity that we've seen in so many documented CIA scandals that we've already seen reported. So it's almost like it's giving us a picture of run-of-the-mill CIA activity that we've seen elsewhere. That is not that surprising. The ties to Air America, not that surprising. But it's this additional added, layer to it that is documented in the Finders, and that's why it's so dangerous. I think it's one of the most important child abuse rings. I won't say child trafficking, even though I would say that it was child trafficking, but as far as they were concerned, the children were traveling with the consent of their parents. But is a child abuse ring that has been associated with intelligence. It is absolutely one of the most important examples of that, because of those other elements that are so typical for other aspects of CIA illegal behavior.
Yeah, well, I'll say it. Fuck them. They're sex traffickers. They can go fuck themselves. So
well,
that's.
And I mean, when the prosecution, and this is the thing too. So you had Tallahassee that would refuse to prosecute. You have the Metro Police Department, and then you have the federal. The talk about, well, they didn't commit a federal crime, but the thing is that people were not. They dropped the charges in Tallahassee as well. So there was no charges, whether local or federal, and they justified that by saying, well, the parents were okay with them traveling. But they ignore, they do not address and ignore the two children that were found to have been sexually abused by saying, well, we couldn't tell by who. Well, that's what an investigation is for, guys. Yeah. I don't know of any child abuse that would ever be dropped at, well, they were abused, but we don't know by who. And secondarily, the children talked about, and it seemed to be confirmed by the investigation, that the children were made to sleep outside in DC. They were not allowed in the house. If that isn't neglect, I don't know what is. and they are found not to have been neglectful. Can you imagine anyone in a normal situation who would not allow their children to come inside in DC winter and would be allowed to keep those children? In that case, I don't see why the consent of the parents on these children traveling has anything to do with whether they should be traveling or not.
Not at all. I mean, literally, like we could go through and find other instances of similar type of abuse and sexual assault and trafficking that was investigated correctly because it didn't have ties to the CIA. So
exactly.
there's no way. And I'm probably going to have my friend Eric Oldenburg on the show, who's a former child crimes investigator, and I really want to see what he says about this, because there's no...
Me too.
There's no way that this is accurate at all. But Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time and breaking this down, helping, showing this to me and helping me break this down so I can break this down for my audience. Where can people follow your work online?
They can find me at Elizabeth Lee Vos on Twitter. They can also find my work contributed to Consortium News and on the webcast every Friday, 8 to 10 Eastern on CN Live. Thank you again. This is a really important topic, and I'm happy to speak about it. So.
I really appreciate you telling me and coming on the show. And to all my viewers out there, if you're not familiar with Elizabeth's work, please follow her. She's a real indie journalist. She's not just an angry comedian so she's out there doing real work. So please follow. If you're always, I know many of you are always like, Graham, what are some other indie media outlets? I absolutely follow what Elizabeth is doing and what they're doing over at Consortium News. And also with regard to this case, I will put the link of the Martinez, where you can download the Martinez document and the FBI document, in the show notes, and please go through them so you can see exactly what we're talking about. There's not enough time to go through these 300.
Exactly. We could spend 5 days going through the details of them and still not really get to the bottom of it, because it's just that in-depth and complicated. So
yeah, but the short of it is, it's CIA is involved. They covered it up, and Martinez was uncovered, and then they shut it down. So that means if they did it in 1987, they're still doing it now somewhere. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, and all the viewers out there. Thank you so much. I'm completely member supported, so I don't get money from Pfizer or Raytheon like they do at MSNBC or Shell Oil or anything like that. So please go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. Like, share, and subscribe. Of course, the Progressive Comedy Tour with Ron Placone. November, we're going to Australia. Other tour dates, go to GrahamElwood.com. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Elizabeth Lee Vos.
Thanks for having me.